The American Revolutionary War was a traumatic event for the Western Hemisphere, including Bermuda. In 1775, some Bermudians, sympathetic when America rebelled against British rule, stole gunpowder from the British Army in St. George's. They delivered it to an American ship for General George Washington's armies. The Continental Congress exempted Bermuda from the food and grain embargo against other British territories during the Revolutionary War. In 1776, neighbors of the original 13 American colonies took sides in the conflict. Despite Bermuda's reliance on trade with the American colonies, political bonds with Britain proved stronger during the war. Bermuda thus remained loyal to the British Crown. In 1777, the Americans proceeded to invade Bermuda with landing parties to spike British guns and destroy the walls of a fort. The Americans escaped on their ships in what became only the second time in the history of Bermuda that it was invaded. The Treaty of Paris, signed on September 3, 1783, by the Americans and Great Britain, formally ended the war. Great Britain signed ancillary treaties with France and Spain as the Treaties of Versailles of 1783. Britain gave up large portions of land in North America, but retained Bermuda. During the War of 1812, the British Navy used Bermuda as a base from which to ransack Washington, D.C. In July 1814, a British Royal Navy fleet sailed from Bermuda to successfully attack and burn Washington, D.C., in retaliation for the American attack on and burning of Yorktown, present-day Toronto, Canada. Then it attempted the same thing on Fort McHenry in Baltimore. During that engagement, Francis Scott Key, as a temporary detainee on one of the British warships, wrote the words of what became the Star-Spangled Banner. The Americans responded by confiscating the unprotected cargo of Bermuda's merchant fleet, devastating the local economy. Canada's Civil War ended unsuccessfully in 1838 with the deporting, in chains, of 9 prominent French Canadians to Bermuda as political prisoners. The U.S. Civil War, that is, Abraham Lincoln's War of 1861 to 65, proved lucrative for the island of Bermuda. When the Northern American states blockaded southern ports, known as Operation Anaconda, cotton traders employed small, fast, paddleboat steam vessels to outrun Northern naval gunboats. These vessels were not capable of an Atlantic crossing, and Bermuda blossomed as a transshipment center on the blockade runners' route to England. 2 Confederate 1864 blockade runners, the Mary Celestia and the Nola, sank in Bermudian waters. Bermuda's short-lived prosperity, however, collapsed with the defeat of the South. In 1883, Princess Louise, daughter of Queen Victoria, is credited with putting Bermuda on the tourist map after paying an extended visit to the islands to escape the long Canadian winter. The princess was the wife of the Marquis of Lorne, the Governor-General of Canada from 1878 to 83. Her time as Governor's Lady in Canada was marked by the naming of Lake Louise in the Canadian Rocky Mountains of Alberta. In 1850, Samuel Cunard of Halifax introduced his steam packet service from New York to Bermuda. By the turn of the century, Bermuda was well on its way to becoming a fashionable winter destination for snowbirds, who flocked aboard steamers crossing regularly from New York to Hamilton. Thus were born Bermudaphiles. Samuel Longhorn Clemens, also known as Mark Twain, enjoyed, lived in, and loved Bermuda. In his final years, this world-famous writer spent more and more time in Bermuda. Other famous writers who loved Bermuda included Frances Hodgson Burnett, who won international renown in 1886 for her book Little Lord Fauntleroy, and The Secret Garden. She loved Bermuda so much she continued to reside there until her death in 1924 at the age of 75. In 1917, one-time Bermuda visitor, President Woodrow Wilson, ordered American naval vessels to use the island as a World War I base. Now, let's take a look at World War II activities on St. David's Island and the Royal Naval Dockyard, also known as King's Wharf. Bermuda's strategic location in the Atlantic secured it a role in Allied military and intelligence operations during the Second World War. However, its proximity to the U.S. mainland made it inevitable that the U.S. take primary responsibility for developing bases on the island. The British subsequently signed a 99-year lease handing over substantial portions of Bermuda's territory to the U.S. military. The U.S. constructed an airbase on St. David's Island, where the international airport is now located. King's Wharf, Bermuda's third port, and the port of choice for bigger cruise ships, is often referred to as the West End or the Royal Naval Dockyard. Built in 1814, it was once dubbed Gibraltar of the West. The Georgian-style fort later served as a North Atlantic base during both World Wars. Finally abandoned in 1951, the area's reincarnation gives visitors plenty to see and do, including the Bermuda Maritime Museum, Arts Center, Bermuda Craft Market, and Bermuda Rum Cake Company. In the wake of World War II, women were given the right to vote, and restriction on black voters were removed. In 1963, the Progressive Labor Party was introduced, in part to represent the interests of non-white Bermudians in the face of a government almost totally made up of white landowners. The rest of the parliamentarians united to form the United Bermuda Party. The two parties worked together to produce the 1968 Constitution that provided for full internal self-government while leaving security, defense, and diplomatic affairs to Britain. Although Bermuda had long prided itself on the relative harmony of its race relations, riots and race antagonism in the 1970s resulted in the removal of all institutional discrimination and the beginning of talks on independence from Britain. In the decades that have followed since, the independence movement became the dominant political issue, but a referendum in 1995 failed by two-thirds majority as Bermudians became apprehensive about the political and economic cost of independence. Although a healthy majority of islanders voted against independence in 1995, the issue continues to be debated. Modern-day Bermuda is affluent thanks to its status as an offshore financial center and tax haven. More than 13,000 companies are registered in Bermuda. The territory's other mainstay is tourism. More than 500,000 people visit annually. Cars are restricted on the island, one per resident family. No rental cars, so tourists use buses, taxis, bicycles, scooters, and motorbikes. In Bermuda, one will discover tidy pastel cottages, professional gents in ties and shorts, pink sand beaches, and quintessential British traditions like cricket matches, the national sport, King Gold's Cup sailing race, kite flying, tennis, golf. The islands have more courses per square mile than any other nation. And finally, afternoon tea. Most North Americans visiting the island consider it to be quaintly British. The Brits, on the other hand, tend to consider the island highly Americanized. Locals, of course, consider it uniquely Bermudian, a product of nearly 4 centuries of British colonial history and an equally long reliance on North American trade. The current Bermuda flag was adopted in the 1960s. As a British overseas territory, Bermuda's flag features the United Kingdom flag upper left. The green and white badge displays a red lion holding a shield that symbolizes the sinking of the Sea Venture about 1 mile off the coastline of Bermuda in the summer of 1609. The ship was caught in a hurricane and struck a reef. Bermuda's population is less than 100,000, made up of 61% African descent, 38% Caucasian, with a small minority of native Indians. The preferred languages are English and Portuguese. The main religion is Christian. 28% are Anglican and 15% are Roman Catholic, with many churches on the islands. Bermuda's healthy GDP consists of 60% tourism. Its per capita income is one of the highest in the world, with almost no unemployment. Major industries other than tourism include finance, insurance, paints, perfumes, pharmaceuticals, and ship repairing. Its major trading partners are the USA, Canada, and the United Kingdom. Its government consists of Parliamentary British Overseas Territory with internal self-government. Its House of Assembly dates from 1620, which makes it the second oldest parliament after Iceland and England. The head of state is a Governor-General who is the British monarch's representative, along with a premier as its head of government. And finally, we must spotlight Bermuda shorts, which are short pants that end slightly 3 inches above the knee, with a 3-inch hem. They were created at the beginning of the 20th century by British military forces in London, not in Bermuda. The British military wanted their personnel appropriately but lightly attired for duty in the tropical parts of the empire. Before these shorts became official, troops were already cutting off their trousers at the knees to get some heat relief. Bermuda residents quickly started copying the British regiment's military shorts. And finally, what about the Bermuda Triangle? Well, let's keep that hot topic for a future episode. I'm Mark Vinette, and I hope you're enjoying the ride.